two smartphones priced at around about £350 sterling, both borrowing from their feature sets of their bigger brother flagship smartphones. This is the Tech Travel Geeks side-by-side comparison between the OnePlus Nord and the Google Pixel 4a. If you don't already, please do subscribe to the Tech Travel Geeks here on YouTube. Right then, I'm Matteo, the Chief Mobile Opinionist here at Tech Travel Geeks. And as I said, this is the side-by-side comparison between the OnePlus Nord, the original OnePlus Nord, and the Google Pixel 4a. Both are affordable smartphones priced at around about £350, but you may be able to get them at better deals through Black Friday deals or in the run-up to Christmas. Right then, so the Google Pixel 4a is a device that borrows heavily from the Google Pixel 4, but is actually much closer in its DNA to the Google Pixel 5. It's an affordable smartphone where Google have taken the best bits and made some compromises, but come out with a good all-round smartphone, which we'll be completing our full long-term review of soon on the Tech Travel Geeks YouTube channel. The OnePlus Nord is a bit of a departure from previous experience from OnePlus. It's an affordable smartphone that sits outside of OnePlus's normal product portfolio and brings a lot of very interesting features to that £350 price range. So both devices are priced similarly, but what are the key differences between the two? What are you choosing in one over the other? I'll look at walking you through that. Both devices were released in the summer of 2020 and are set to be bestsellers over the Christmas period here in the UK, as well as across other markets globally. So the Google Pixel 4a is definitely a more compact device. It's made out of polycarbonate plastic, it's unapologetic about that, and it seems to be a single piece of plastic which is relatively smooth matte finish with a single camera on the back and a nice screen at the front, which in this case is an OLED screen capable of HDR. It's only 5.8 inches in diagonal. It's a relatively small screen. That screen has a dotch or a cutout for the selfie camera in the top left-hand corner. So it's an interesting design. It's a very handleable device, and in that price range it performs very, very well. The OnePlus Nord is closer to a traditional smartphone in that sense. It is a bigger, chunkier device. It has glass at the back and as well as a glass screen at the front. The OnePlus Nord has a very different setup. As I said, the display in this case is a 6.4-inch display in diagonal. It has more or less the same resolution as the Google Pixel 4a, but the key difference is that it's an AMOLED screen that not only is the same technology, it also has a faster refresh rate. So this is a 90 Hz refresh rate screen, which should give you a more fluid experience overall with the smartphone. So that's the key difference in the displays, the size and the fact that the OnePlus Nord has a faster refresh rate one. Some people may not be bothered too much by that. It may not be something they're interested in, but it does give you a very fluid experience overall, whilst browsing the web, scrolling through long, rich content pages. It is a slightly smoother experience. But is it worth that? We'll have to see in day-to-day use. But more importantly, it's a very subjective thing. Individuals like it, others don't. But because of a different aspect ratio, the OnePlus Nord's screen resolution is actually slightly higher. It's 1080 pixels by 2400 pixels. And so I would say that's a key difference that gives to the size of the device. Now obviously the size is something that you'll see side by side. The two devices are quite different. That's mainly because of the screen. But obviously the Google Pixel 4a has a smaller battery. There's less space for battery. And Google, in this case, have opted for a 3140 milliamp hour battery, which is non-removable. It's not a very big battery by 2020 standards, whilst the OnePlus Nord has a 4115 milliamp hour battery. It's a significantly bigger one. Both devices have fast charge technology in their batteries and smartphones. The Google Pixel 4a has the same technology Google's been using for a number of years now. It's 18-watt power delivery. It's not the fastest fast charging there is, but it is enough to top up your smartphone quickly. And with that 3140 milliamp hour battery in the Google Pixel 4a, you're more likely to need that, depending on your usage, than you are on the bigger battery OnePlus Nord. Now, the OnePlus Nord has a different type of fast charging. It has warp charge. So that's OnePlus's own fast charging, which in this case fast charges at 30 watts. That's close to double the speed the battery in the Google Pixel 4a charges. So you have two big advantages here: a bigger battery in of itself and a faster charging, provided you are using OnePlus's own warp charge brick and cable. It's really important to remember that you need both in this case. Now, the battery obviously gives a bit of weight to the device, as well as that glass back. In terms of construction, the OnePlus Nord has a plastic frame. It's slightly more flexy, if that makes sense. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just makes the device lighter, but potentially also has some issues in the longer run. I haven't come into it yet over a couple of months with the OnePlus Nord, but in terms of construction, it doesn't feel as solid and as light as the Google Pixel 4a. So key thing to bear in mind there if you're looking at this type of smartphone. Now, the two smartphones have different screens. What we haven't looked at is in this case, the cutout for the selfie cameras. I say cameras because there's two of them. The OnePlus Nord has two selfie cameras in a pill cutout at the top left-hand corner of the screen. And those two cameras, in this case, are a standard 32 megapixel selfie camera, which is very high resolution in terms of number of pixels in the sensor, and it performs relatively well. But there's one additional camera here, which is an 8 megapixel ultra wide one. This is reminiscent of what we saw in the Google Pixel 3 XL, which had that extra wide angle selfie camera, which is great for group situations or selfies in landscape mode. So if you're in front of a landscape with something really wide in front of it, that allows you to switch between the two. So whilst that's the case with the OnePlus Nord, the dot we saw on the Google Pixel 4a in this case is a standard 8 megapixel sensor. It's nothing special, but with Google's software and tuning, it performs very, very well. So that difference in numbers on paper may be important, but in reality, the selfies are pretty much equivalent, apart from the fact that the OnePlus Nord has that lower resolution but wider angle sensor as well. So we've looked at selfie cameras because they're part of the screen. Let's go back to the back of the device and look at the other sensors on the back. The Google Pixel 4a keeps it very, very simple. You have one sensor on the back, and that is a 12.2 megapixel sensor. It's a really good camera. It's partly because of the fact that it's good hardware to start with, but it's also Google's software makes it an exceptional camera, especially in low light. There's no addition of a wide-angle lens camera. There's nothing special out on above that. It's just a very good main camera. And in terms of video recording, it is capable of recording 4K video at 30 frames per second. So you do have a good video camera in this device. It's just they're going for software over the actual hardware quality. Whereas with OnePlus, this long camera module at the back houses 4 cameras. It's pretty ridiculous. So the main sensor is a 48 megapixel f/1.8 camera. So this is a sensor that we've seen often in other devices, and with the lens and setup in the software for the OnePlus Nord, it performs pretty well. It's not as good as the Google Pixel 4a in low light, but it's getting there. It's not too far off. There's also an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera. Now that's really good in daylight, especially in sunshine, but it does suffer in low light. There's also an extra 5 megapixel depth sensor, which helps with things like understanding what's in the foreground, what's in the background. That is not usable in day-to-day use, but it is good in portrait mode, so it helps you take those blurry background portrait shots. And there's also one of those things that baffles me in 2020, a 2 megapixel dedicated macro camera. In this case, it's not a very good one. They may have well avoided putting that in it and maybe invested in other better parts of the product. But then again, this is a OnePlus device, and it needs to sell in markets where people prefer the details on paper rather than the actual experience of using a smartphone. So those are the 4 sensors on the back for the OnePlus Nord. Overall, it is a good camera experience for this price category. Both devices outperform their competition in the £300 to £400 price range with their camera setup. But I would say it's 2 fundamentally different philosophies of how to do cameras on smartphones. So we've had a quick look at the hardware, the battery, the screen. In terms of charging and data, we mentioned charging earlier. Both of these phones use USB Type-C. Both of these phones use USB Type-C. As I said, there are different chargers. For OnePlus's Warp Charge, you do need to use the Warp Charge itself. So, in terms of storage and capacity, the Google Pixel 4a only has one option. That is, in this case, 128 gigabytes of storage and 6 gigabytes of RAM. And the OnePlus Nord has a bit more choice in that space, but the key factor is that the most popular model is 6 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigabytes of storage if you're in India, whereas in the UK I opted for the 128 gigabyte storage one with 8 gigabytes of RAM, and there is also a model with 256 gigabytes of storage and 12 gigabytes of RAM. But the most popular one, my understanding is, it's that 128 gigabyte storage, 8 gigabytes of RAM. Both devices are non-expandable, so you can't put a micro SD card or a nano memory card in. So bear that in mind when making your purchase decision. Whilst the Google Pixel 4a comes in only one storage and RAM option, the OnePlus Nord, there's a few more choices to make. Both devices take nano SIMs, but whilst the Google Pixel 4a in the version that is on sale in the UK only takes one nano SIM, the OnePlus Nord is a dual SIM device, so you'll be able to put 2 SIM cards in if you choose to do so. Both of these devices have all the usual Wi-Fi options. Both of them have Bluetooth 5 in this case, so they can handle things like aptX and HD audio. Both devices have the usual array of global positioning systems for your mapping and navigation, and both of them have NFC support, which is perfectly functional for tap to pay in shops, for using it on public transit and other NFC uses such as quick pairing with wireless earphones. So you will definitely need to use Bluetooth to pair the OnePlus Nord with external earphones because there is no courage port, there's no 3.5mm audio jack. Whereas the Google Pixel 4a doesn't have a 3.5mm audio jack on the bottom, it does actually have one at the top. So this may be a key consumer decision for you, is do you need to use wired headphones? The Google Pixel 4a does still offer that, which is great to see from Google, understanding that in this price category, people may actually want that feature. In terms of software, obviously the Google Pixel 4a is a Google Pixel device. It's running on Google's own version of Android, arguably the pure version of Android, or the one that is as Google see it should be. And it's a clean implementation of Android. In this case, it's already been updated to Android 11. It has dark mode, all the key features from the bigger Pixel smartphones. It's just in a smaller, more affordable package. And that Google experience in terms of software is driven by a Snapdragon 730G chipset. So this is a relatively new platform. It's an 8nm chipset, so it's very efficient in terms of power usage. And it has an Adreno 618 chipset, which is more than enough to play games like Call of Duty Mobile and Goat Simulator in medium to high graphics settings. So overall, great, but the Google Pixel 4a has that slightly smaller battery, so don't expect to be playing for hours on end, because you will get hit by that. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is that chipset from Qualcomm that's in the Google Pixel 4a doesn't have 5G. So for most people that won't be an issue. 5G isn't available widely yet, but the Google Pixel 4a is a very capable 4G smartphone. Whereas the software experience on the OnePlus Nord is Oxygen OS as of late 2020. This is Oxygen OS 11, or is it 10? Let's just check. So about this phone, you'll see this is the about screen of OnePlus. It's very attractive in my view. And so this is Android 10, it's Oxygen OS 10, but it is scheduled to get the next version of Android and Oxygen OS 11 in early 2021. But it's Oxygen OS, which is close to the Google experience, but with quite a few extra features. So it has enabled theming, so you can see the themes slightly different. It has dark modes and some extra software features that optimize your overall smartphone experience. But the default launcher I'm using at the moment has a lot of similarities to the Google Experience launcher, including the Google feed on the far left screen of your smartphone. So very smooth, very pleasant software experience on the OnePlus Nord. One thing I would say is that that's not just the 90 Hz screen. The chipset that is running inside the OnePlus Nord is the Snapdragon 765. So it's a slightly more efficient chipset. It is 5G enabled, it's a faster chipset, and it has a better graphics card. So this is a better smartphone for gaming. And because of the fact I purchased the 8GB RAM version in the UK, it is better for things like Call of Duty Mobile, which is a much more demanding smartphone game. So that means that it also has 5G. You'll be able to connect to 5G as we have tested here in Edinburgh on the 3 network. I've also used this smartphone on Vodafone's 5G network. It is very, very fast when needed. What I would say is that between the two smartphones, obviously the OnePlus Nord has better battery life and it charges faster, but battery drain, when you're, say, at home in lockdown and maybe you don't use your smartphone for a while, the OnePlus Nord doesn't seem to hold a charge as long. It may be that I have an apps like Facebook or Instagram in the background that's draining battery, but the Google Pixel 4a, when not in use, doesn't drain the battery as fast. If I leave the OnePlus Nords in normal use during the day and then leave it off charge overnight, it drains pretty fast. So that's one thing to bear in mind. Now, in terms of buttons and their placement, the Google Pixel 4a keeps things very simple. You have the volume rocker on the right-hand side of the screen and the power button, that different colored power button, whereas the OnePlus Nord has the power button on the right and the volume rocker on the left. OnePlus also have included a feature from the OnePlus smartphones, which is that silent mode switch, similar to the one you see on the iPhone. And it works. It's a 3-position switch, which goes between silent mode, vibrate, and ring. And it's quite handy, especially if you're going in and out of meetings. That is a very, very useful feature. So different setup in terms of buttons there, but overall, 2 incredibly different smartphones in the same price range, which both deliver great value for money. Now, we'll be putting links to our other content in the description to this video. If you want to ask any more questions, feel free to do so in the comments section below. I can't make the decision for you. It is a very difficult one to make if you're choosing between the two. But I would say that overall, both are great choices for that price category. They blow the competition out of the water. And if you're wanting a bigger smartphone, maybe for gaming or media consumption with better battery life, the OnePlus may be the one for you. If, on the other hand, you're looking for a smartphone for all the basics and to do that really well with a really good, simple-to-use camera, the Google Pixel 4a may be the one for you. As I said at the beginning, both are in the £300 to £400 price range, but you can find both of them on special offers on different marketplaces or from network providers. Anyway, we will wrap up this video. As I said, please leave us a comment if you'd like to know more. If you don't already, please do subscribe to the Tech Travel Geeks and have that bell tapped so that you're notified of when our full long-term reviews of these 2 devices are released. And that won't be long now. So thanks for watching, and goodbye from me.